Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're brand new here, my name is Mary from the blog therosehomestead.com, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you a recipe I recently posted over on the blog for a basic sourdough loaf that is more traditional in the method of making it. So doing the autolyse, measuring in grams, the stretches and the folds and all of that. The reason that I brought it to the blog and I'm bringing it to the channel is because some people, they want measurements in grams, and some people enjoy that process of making sourdough and not just the easiest way. So we're going to make this loaf today. You start it the day before and put it in the fridge overnight and bake it off the next day. So it's pretty flexible in a sense that once you put it in the fridge, you can wait days before you bake it. So it's flexible that way. So let's just jump right into this recipe. You will need a kitchen scale for this. I picked one up at Walmart for $20, and so they're pretty inexpensive, and I find that I use it for other things as well. So let's jump right into this recipe. All right, to make this recipe, the first thing you want to make sure of is that your sourdough starter is fed and active. That means that it was fed within 4 to 12 hours ago, depending on your starter. Now for me, I keep mine in the fridge, and so I fed it 2 evenings ago and it's still really active, and I use it like that all the time, so I know it's going to be just fine. And so just making sure that it's not hungry or it's been days and days since you fed it. So the first thing you want to do is weigh out your flour and water. So what I like to do is 350 grams of unbleached all-purpose or bread flour and 150 grams of freshly milled whole wheat, or you can use store-bought whole wheat, up to you, and 325 grams of filtered water. Now, you're going to mix these together and you're going to have what's called an autolyse period, which is just kind of a fancy word that means that this is going to sit for 30 minutes and the flour is going to have an opportunity to absorb all of the water. And it's just easier to work with after that. So once you've let it sit for 30 minutes, we're going to measure out our starter and our water. Now for this recipe, I call for 100 grams of sourdough starter and 5 grams of salt. What I like to do, usually I do this in the bowl, but I'm going to take it out of the bowl and show you how to incorporate the starter and the salt into the dough. So I like to dimple the dough and then pour the starter and the salt over top of that and kind of just spread it out with my hand, or you could do it with a spoon or spatula or something like that. And then I just start turning the dough over on top of that starter and salt and start incorporating. Now it's going to be sticky, it's going to be messy, and that's fine. Just keep working with it. You can get a little bowl of water and filtered water and dip your fingers in it to just kind of keep it from sticking to your hands too awfully bad. But you're going to work it and work it and work it. It probably takes about 2 to 3 minutes to make sure that it's completely incorporated. You'll know the salt is completely incorporated in the dough when it is incredibly sticky and tacky. And after it gets to that stage, I just put it back in the bowl and I cover it and I let it sit for about 15 minutes. Now at this point, we're going to start stretching and folding the dough. And what I like to do is visit it about every 15 to 20 minutes and perform a stretch and fold. All that you do when you're stretching and folding is you're lifting up a corner of the dough and then folding it back on top of itself. Turn the bowl a little, lift it, fold it, lift it, fold it, till you make it all the way around the bowl and make sure all the dough has been stretched and folded. All that stretching and folding does is build structure and gluten in the dough. So you don't have to set a timer or be really fussy about your stretching and folding, but you do want to do it 4 to 6 times within the first 2 hours of the bulk fermentation. Now once you've done it, I like to do it around 6 times. Once I've done that, I cover the bowl and then I just let it go. I'm going to put it on my counter and just let it ferment most of the day for 4 to 6 hours. Depending on the strength of your starter, it could be on the lower end of that or it could take longer. But you can see the signs. You'll see bubbles in the dough. It will be more pillowy and airy, so you'll know that you've gotten a good rise. Once you see those signs that it has fermented after the 4 to 6 hours, the next step is to gently take it out of the bowl and put it on your work surface. I like to just take my fingers in a little bit of that water and just kind of barely put it on the workstation to make sure it's not too sticky. Or you can put a little bit of flour. I alternate between these. I think today I put a little bit of flour down. Get your dough on top of that, and we're going to shape it. Now for this particular one, I'm making a boule. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I'm making a round loaf. And all you do to shape it is pull the corners of the dough into itself, the sticky side pulling into itself. And once you pull all of those corners around, flip the dough over and start rolling it towards you, dragging it across the work surface. That builds tension on top of the dough. Now, we're just going to let that sit for a minute and prepare our banneton basket. If you don't have a banneton basket, you can use a medium-sized colander or bowl that is lined with a tea towel that you have generously sprinkled with some flour. You want to make sure you put quite a bit of flour. You can always brush the excess flour off of the dough, but if it sticks, I had this happen actually last week. It stuck to the banneton basket and it was a huge mess. So make sure that you give it plenty of flour. I also like to flour the top of the dough before I put it in there. It's just added insurance to make sure it's going to come out the next morning. Now I'm just going to turn the tea towel. I'm going to pull it in and just put it over top of the dough. You probably want to sprinkle a little flour right there on top of the upside of the dough as well, so that the tea towel won't stick to it. And then I cover it with a bowl cover and I stick it in the fridge. It is in there until it is convenient for me to actually bake the bread. It may be 2 or 3 days depending on when I need it, or it may be the next day. But either way, it's just a really convenient thing to keep it in the fridge. So the next day or 2 or 3 days later, I'm going to take my dough out of the refrigerator after I have preheated my Dutch oven in the oven up to 450 degrees. So once it's preheated, I take my dough out of the fridge and I turn it onto either a piece of parchment paper or a bread sling, whatever you have. I will brush off the excess flour if there's too much on there, and then I will score it. Now, scoring sourdough that has just come out of the fridge is so easy. It's like so easy to make a beautiful score on that dough. So make sure that you try this if you haven't. Even if you're not making this particular recipe, try putting your dough in the fridge for 6 to 8 hours before you actually bake it. You will be surprised what a difference it makes for scoring. So once I have it scored, then I'm going to get the Dutch oven out of the oven, take the lid off carefully. It's going to be very, very hot, and lower the dough down in there, replace the lid into the oven for 20 minutes with the cover on. And then we're going to remove the lid, bake it another 15 to 20 minutes without the lid so it gets deeply golden brown and crispy. And then we're going to put it on a cooling rack, allow it to cool completely. You don't want to touch this dough. You don't want to slice it. It will continue baking for a certain amount of time. So it may be gooey inside if you cut it too soon. But I let mine cool down for at least a few hours before I slice it. And then there's nothing quite like slicing into this loaf of bread and seeing those beautiful holes and just how gorgeous that this loaf turns out. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy videos on cooking from scratch, gardening, food preservation, and homesteading, and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below. I put out 2 new videos every single week. Head over to the blog to get the printable recipe. I'll link it down below, and you can make this whenever you want. And we will see you on the next video.